Farming food and fashion for a discerning world is serious business in Aotearoa, New Zealand. There are new opportunities everywhere just waiting for the open-minded. Sarah's Country shines a light on the matters that matter most. And here's your host, Sarah Perriam.
Well, kia ora and welcome to Sarah's Country, where we love connecting knowledge and shining the light on the matters that matter most, and particularly the opportunities I believe are everywhere. They are just waiting for the open-minded. Now, your Changemaker show every Wednesday, live from 7 o'clock on sarahscountry.com, dedicates a whole hour every week to the latest innovations, ideas and solutions that support the way we farm and grow for a better future. I'm getting so much feedback about how much you love this show in particular, but of course the new formats, where it's giving you a menu of options to choose from, what you feel like served up with both a serious dose of optimism that I feel is really important in an uncertain world. Also sometimes I'd like to think a place of regenerating our passion for why we do what we do. And sometimes you get a bit down and out. And Changemaker is certainly that one to boost your inspiration around the innovations that are happening in our sector. Now, if you never ever need to get in touch with any of the guests that you find interesting, please don't hesitate to email me, sarah@sarahscountry.com, and I'll do my best to connect you, because that is how we make cool stuff happen. And I think that we can progress together faster as a team as well. If you have a super cool story for Changemaker of any people or organisations that are doing great things that we need to spread the word on, please don't hesitate to email me, and the team can arrange that to be on an up-and-coming Changemaker. Now, after the break coming up, how can we help speed up the process of hiring seasonal workers? There is an awesome new software called PICMI. The founder, Genevieve Griffin-George, explains the groundbreaking new mobile app that reduces hiring workers by 70%. And then we are going to learn about a very cool approach to regeneration and sustainability, utilising all waste and turning it into energy. This is in the avocado industry. Olivado's chief executive, Hannam, explains the process of Olivado's taking of avocado waste and turning it into biogas, and what they are doing for the environment. Now, lastly on the show, how we grow our crops to withstand climate change is of great interest to farmers here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Kioumars Ghamkhar shares some of the country's most valued intellectual property from the Margot Forde Germplasm Centre. But firstly, award-winning dairy farmer Fraser McGougan shares his intentions as the newly appointed chair of the DairyNZ Climate Change Ambassadors. Fraser will be joining us from Whakatane to talk about how there is a group of climate change ambassadors working to help influence reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in the dairy industry.
This is Sarah's Country, produced in alliance with Farmers Weekly, the place New Zealand farmers turn to for a trusted source of in-depth agricultural journalism. Stay connected to the matters that matter most by subscribing to My Daily Digest at farmersweekly.co.nz.
Well, DairyNZ's Climate Change Ambassadors is not a new concept, but it does have a new chair. Fraser McGougan is from Whakatane and is looking forward to leading the ambassadors to engage with farmers, communities and decision makers to provide a farmer voice at a national level. He's been a climate change ambassador since 2018, and Fraser joins us now on Sarah's Country. Fraser, this is a really exciting thing for you to be a part of off-farm.
Yeah, it's really neat. I think you summed it up in your introduction about New Zealand's progression in agriculture. And personally, we've had exactly the same progression. We started out as young farm owners and we had to chase financials, then we chased production, and then kind of had the epiphany moment where it's actually we need to do something about the environment. And sitting around talking about it on farm sometimes doesn't make as much change as we need. So this opportunity arose, and just kind of taking a bit of a gamble and trying to help out other farmers on the road to climate change.
How did you become involved in this initiative?
We started out with a few different of the dairy industry awards, but when we entered the Balanced Farm Environmental Awards, it really interested us, and we got engaged with a group of people who were all doing similar things, but all in isolation, but all in different areas. And so from there, we've pushed on and found that with DairyNZ, there was a group of climate change ambassadors, and I became one of them to represent and find out information and find what we could do. So it was just a natural progression, kind of striving for doing a bit more for other people. It's not all about me or all about our farm. It's actually a bigger picture, and that's what climate change is now, which I'm rapidly realising.
Yeah, and of course there has been a lot of vilification of the cow, and that they are only one part of the overall direction of how we as an agricultural sector in New Zealand can make our contribution to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You said there about collectively working together, and I'd love to know what sort of learnings and findings you have amongst yourselves found is some of the low-hanging fruit.
I think the first part of the question there was the Climate Change Commission has made it quite clear that this is a national problem which we'll need to address, and everyone has their part to play. And so with dairy farming, we're not out on our own, but we've actually been on this pathway for the last 3 years. And as the lowest producer with the carbon footprint of milk in the world, we're in a good place to start. But picking up low-hanging fruit such as being more efficient with your fertiliser use. There's small things which you can take, small steps, such as potentially decreasing or matching your stocking rate to your pasture growth curve, that you can make quite big returns quite rapidly. And most of the time they actually make financial sense as well. So we actually do have little tools which we can pull, and fertility of your herd is a simple one, which people kind of think about, but if we focus on, we can actually make some more rapid results.
What did you make of Rod Carr, the Climate Change Commission's report when it came to the recent suggestions that simply reducing stocking rates is the first port of call when we haven't had enough time to get those key technologies such as gene edited ryegrasses, methane inhibitors, etc.
I think what he was alluding to there is that there's a natural progression of decreasing dairy in our area, which is the Bay of Plenty. I can only speak for this area, but we've had in our valley, where I farm, we've had 3 farms move into either cropping, maize, or dairy support, or there's horticulture as well. And so that natural progression of matching the land use to the land with kiwi fruit in certain areas, or beef and sheep and others, or trees and others, is actually quite natural, and that's probably from market driven as well. So we've seen at the back of low payouts. We've got a really great payout now, so it's a really good opportunity, but that is probably what he's alluding to there.
The Dairy Action for Climate Change was created in 2018, so 3 years later, what have we done?
A lot of learning, a lot of research, and a lot of networking. Like for me personally, I started like everyone else. I thought I knew about climate change, but I didn't know the amount of impact that it was going to have, and also the rapidly evolving space which we have signed up for. So He Waka Eke Noa is part of the government strategy to do that, and that is evolving at quite a quick pace. So we're just on a real journey at the moment, and it's going very quickly. And so trying to stay abreast of changes and trying to provide feedback to government and industries about what we're doing is probably the most important thing. Like I've really pushed that young people have to still be given an opportunity. We can't buy our way out of this problem. We actually need to address the issues. We can't differentiate it and give it to other industries. This is our problem. Our climate change is something for us to own, which we can do bits about, and we need to know and take logical steps and not take risks, but just take 1% gains and really, start on the journey.
It's an interesting time too. It's great to receive, ag research findings that we are the lowest carbon emitted dairy industry in the world. But that sometimes can be detriment to the message that we still have further to go. How do you find the communicating to the wider dairy industry when people sort of see those headlines and think, oh no, we're out of the clear, we're good?
I think with dairy farming being 25% of the emissions profile of New Zealand, we're one of the larger contributors. So even though we're good on a global stage, we haven't focused on the improvements which we can make. Like, as you said before, we haven't done the gene editing. We haven't had the rumen modifiers yet. We haven't really had time to do the research, and research takes time. So we need reinvestment from government to help us speed up and make these decisions and provide that they're robust and are sustainable. Financially, socially is a huge thing. And they have to fit with our targets, which are New Zealand's targets. So, it's...
What do you make of the ability to make changes in our inputs, our diesel-operated systems and our fertiliser application, as opposed to waiting for new technologies? I know there's been a lot of sentiment around, well, it's not practical to have electric tractors and the torque's not there, etc. I mean, how can we start to at least move in that direction and actually practically still run our farms?
There's a few things that we've done, and it's probably driven more financially initially, but it's putting GPS guidance on our tractors. It's really quite financially simple. It's great for start, but what it does is it provides us with no overlap when we put it on nitrogen. So we instantly are saving on overlap. We're instantly being able to target our areas, and we've dropped 10% of nitrogen because we don't do gateways. It's practical solutions by farmers for farmers, and you go 10% off a nitrogen bill, or actually 10% off a highly leaching area around a gateway. It's a win-win. So just farmers talking, and farmers will solve these problems, and they will make, good. It's a number 8 mentality. If we have something, we will address it. Yeah.
Do you think that we have to be financially incentivised by our suppliers? By the processes that we supply in premium programs to achieve this behavioural change, or do we have to sort of get the stick out?
I'm unsure of exactly what will happen, or maybe will people choose not to buy a product if it isn't, say, for instance, carbon neutral. Maybe they'll choose something off the shelf, so you won't sell as much. I wouldn't know the exact answer to that. You'd probably have to ask the producers or the dairy companies.
Yeah, well, I suppose to clarify my question, it's more to do with, do you think dairy farmers in New Zealand need a premium supply contract with the likes of Fonterra or Synlait to drive behavioural change in this area?
Yeah, because at the moment you're getting a premium for New Zealand dairy products because of the grass-fed, the quality product. So having a carbon neutral product may drive that. It will be very similar to branding of organics, which people will pay for. But in a downturn, they potentially won't. So it's interesting to see where it will head.
Yeah, and a fantastic group of ambassadors that you have, recognised quite a few names there from across the country on the DairyNZ Climate Change Ambassadors group that Fraser is chairing. Fraser, best wishes for all of the discussions at high level you are having on behalf of the dairy industry with government. It's not an easy job, particularly when you're, of course, farming with your wife Catherine on 430 cow dairy farm in Whakatane as well. So well done, and thank you very much on behalf of all our listeners and viewers.
Cool. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Right, up next, one of the most stressful times of year, and particularly right now, is sourcing seasonal work for our growers. There's a super cool new app. It's called PICMI, and the developer Genevieve Griffin-George will join us shortly to talk about how this is speeding up the hiring process by 70%.
This is Sarah's Country. Catch the latest on the matters that matter most wherever you are. Listen to Sarah's Country on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple or Google Podcasts. Try asking Alexa or Siri. Play Sarah's Country on podcast.
As reported by Richard Rennie in this week's Farmers Weekly, the seasonal push to harvest horticultural crops draws closer, and so does the additional pressure on growers to try and source seasonal staff. But there has been an app developed by a Nelson woman that makes the time-consuming paperwork task of sourcing employees a lot simpler for our growers to find the staff they need, in particular when it is more part-time and spread across the country. We're joined now by PICMI founder Genevieve Griffin-George. Genevieve, this is incredible. I'm really interested to first start on how you got involved in setting this up. Are you connected directly to the industry yourself and your background?
Well, it was an accident that I'm here, but a good accident. So I ended up going in and running our family kiwi fruit orchard just out of Tasman. And so I gained first-hand experience in what it was like to try and hire seasonal staff, find them, but then all the paperwork and admin that you came up against to try and, get on top of before you could get anybody on site doing the work that you needed them to do. And I thought that it was something that our orchard was facing, but it turns out that no, it's something that every single grower across New Zealand and actually the world faces on multiple times a year.
We have so many people similar in terms of that they've come from a problem in their own business and gone out and created softwares, apps, tools. I'd love to know, where do you even start without having, a deep tech background and coding knowledge and those sorts of things?
So I'm non-technical, but we've got a phenomenal team that's working on this project with us. And I think it's easy to come up with an idea, but really hard to actually execute on that. And so that's something that we've been doing for over the last year and a half is I'm a grower, but we've been working alongside growers to develop what it is that they actually need and what are the most frustrating parts of that process. So designing it alongside them to make sure that the actual tech product that comes out of the end is something that's really valuable. And so we call, what PICMI is a tool. So it's not an entire system. We know growers don't want another system that's really hard to use. And so the way that PICMI works is that it's really easy to integrate with your other systems. And it enables a grower to be able to customize and utilize it in the way that they want, when they want, just like your pair of secateurs.
So what sort of integration are you speaking of?
So with PICMI, you create your core criteria. So lots of different growers have different ways in which and requirements for job seekers to meet. So it might be as simple as being able to make sure that the person that you need to hire can turn up at the right time, is legally able to start work. But there is a whole variety of criteria that job seekers need to meet for those businesses. And so what PICMI does is pulls that all into the one place and makes it really easy to have a real-time view of actually what's happening, how many job seekers you've got coming in, and not to worry about all the paperwork and admin.
Oh, I can imagine it would be an absolute headache. But the connection to people moving across the country to, work in one particular seasonal harvest and move into another, things like accommodation and travel also come into it. Have you taken that into account?
Yes, it's something that we know are huge issues, but what PICMI is focusing on is hiring. So we do straight through seasonal hiring, which is contactless. It means you don't actually have to meet the person face to face. What that does is that's reduced the time to hire by 70%. So time can be invested in understanding where you want to put that workforce, what kind of accommodation you need to put them into. But the piece that I really care about, that I wanted to give back on our orchard, was the time to actually be able to train those staff to do the work that I needed them to do, and to get rid of all the busy work to and fro, because it was incredibly frustrating, not just for me as the grower, but for the people that were looking for that work. So back to your point into how do we connect people faster and better, that's what PICMI does. We remove the paperwork and the admin and the frustration so that can be easier.
What are some of those things you've learnt in your experience with your family kiwi fruit farm, as well as talking to growers about reducing staff turnover?
So that's not something we can stop, but we can have a system that completely removes all of the time that you would invest in those people to be able to turn up. So the way that PICMI works is that you can create your application material. You can also bring all of your inductions online. So that means that you don't have to physically organize or schedule somebody to come in to do that induction. They can literally do it in their jammies at 11 o'clock at night and then arrive at work at 7 o'clock in the morning. And so you can guarantee that that worker is arriving prepared, compliant, and has actually agreed and signed an employment contract. And so we're seeing a real shift in that, where job seekers in themselves, they know where they stand. So it's really hard as a grower when you've got to hire a huge amount of people in a short period of time to be able to get back to them in a timely fashion. PICMI does that for them.
I can understand why you've reduced hiring time by 70% from application, contract to induction. That's incredible. And when it's high volumes of staff as well, it's taking out so much more stress on what is already a stressful situation in sourcing. What sort of uptake have you had?
So the thing that we're trying to shift the industry into thinking that we are a tool, not an entire system, and then it's really easy to pick up and just get going. And so we have seen 1,000 job seekers run through our system so far, and we're coming into a really busy season, so we're going to increase that.
Wonderful. Oh, making such a difference in the industry. A change maker, we say on this particular show. Thank you so much. Genevieve Griffin-George, which is the PICMI founder. And of course, you'll be able to find a link to the website in the description below on podcast. It is PICMI.io is the website, I believe. Now, coming up, we are going to be jumping into the avocado industry, where I've uncovered one avocado operation up north that has found a way to turn waste into bioenergy, and the work they are doing in Africa. All that up next here on Sarah's Country.
This is Sarah's Country. Join the conversation. Have thoughts on an interview? Or have you got questions you want answered by a future guest? Let us know. Email sarah@sarahscountry.com.
Well, all of our stories on our Changemaker show are incredibly inspiring, and this is absolutely, no doubt, similar for our next guest, where this company has built one of the biggest biogas plants in Africa, helping turn the waste product from our factories in the likes of avocado and leading into potentially dairy waste into what will be a biogas and fertilizer. They're leading the way in the avocado industry with their approach to regeneration, sustainability, and utilising all that waste to turn into energy. Their team there works hard to leave the communities and environment in a better state than when they started in Kenya. Olivado is carbon neutral now and has made a commitment to be carbon positive by 2022. They have also got a focus in the north in Gary Hannam, Olivado's chief executive, joins us now here on Sarah's Country. Gary, a beautiful backdrop there. I believe you're in north of Oamaru in Riverside Kitchen. What takes you on the road today?
Oh, we've been down visiting friends down in Wanaka, and we're about to go up and visit a dairy farm just north of here.
Fantastic. We will get into how the technology you've utilised in the avocado industry is going to work with dairy waste. But could you give us a bit of a background into your personal journey into getting to a point of having the biggest biogas plants in Africa?
We started into Kenya in 2007, and we had a temporary factory there. And when we went to build our permanent factory, I really wanted a way to use the waste, because we take, say, 15% of the oil out of an avocado and the rest of it is waste, which isn't a very good commercial outcome, really. So I wanted to look at other ways of doing this. And my son, who was with me in Africa at the time, suggested, Dad, why don't we think of biogas?
And was it connected to the communities in Africa and finding a way for them to progress and to have a source of energy that was sustainable as well?
Well, it was actually for us, for the factory, because out in Africa and in the backwoods of Africa, power supply isn't regular. So we wanted to find a way other than having diesel generators.
And what is the process involved in turning waste into biogas, and obviously capturing the methane to turn it into electricity?
Well, we were starting from scratch because there was no research in the world that showed how you could turn avocado waste into methane, or even if it would make good methane. So we had a 2-year research project, which we did in-house in Kenya, and came up and decided, well, yes, it does make good methane. And so then it was, what sort of plant would we build? And so we had to design that as well. So it really was, our green fields start from scratch.
What's your investment here in New Zealand's avocado industry, Gary, and taking that technology forward?
Well, it's about a year ago, we realized we should really build a new factory in Kerikeri. And because the number of avocados being grown in the far north is much higher now, in fact, we'll double our production in the next 5 years because of these new plantings. Having a biogas plant here for the avocado waste is a very good idea as well. So I come from a dairy farming background. And so I thought, well, why don't we look at that for the dairy industry? So now we're combining with the first plant for avocado, and we'll have 2 plants to trial on dairy farms to use the dairy waste off feedlots.
And there's a NAFA Innovation and Enterprise Park that you've recently announced the further innovation to do so. What's the government's support and involvement in such a project?
Well, the Far North Holdings, which is the commercial arm of the District Council, is the mover and shaker behind this innovation park. And we're one of the cornerstone companies moving into it. So the government's involvement is that the regional, the Regional Development Fund that was set up a little while ago is funding the infrastructure there.
It's absolutely fantastic. What does the future look like for this type of technology, do you believe, for both our horticulture and dairy waste in this country?
Well, I think it's an essential part of going forward. There's in the past, the dairy industry has been a major contributor to New Zealand's economy. And it's not that one should sit back and say, well, we have to scale back the dairy industry, because innovations like this mean that we can become world leaders in terms of creating a circular economy for the dairy industry and moving forward and having a competitive advantage overseas for our products. And this is what we've done in avocado, and this is what we know we can do for the dairy industry.
Gary, thank you so much. And it's just incredible that we've speaking to you on this particular show when we've just heard from Fraser, a part of the DairyNZ Climate Change Ambassador in terms of reducing methanes and in the dairy industry. And yet we have a technology here where we can work on utilising it and turning it into biogas. So, goodness, I'm super inspired, and I'm sure our viewers and listeners will be as well, around this massive sustainability project that has been trialled in Africa and now is heading to Northland and to Kerikeri. And Gary, thank you very much for taking the time to join us on Serious Country. Before we go to our next guest, we have a video to play out from Olivado's massive project, and so it gives you a bit of an overview on what's involved in the work that they are doing.
This is Sarah's Country, produced in alliance with Farmers Weekly, the place New Zealand farmers turn to for a trusted source of in-depth agricultural journalism. Stay connected to the matters that matter most by subscribing to My Daily Digest at farmersweekly.co.nz.
As reported by Richard Rennie in this week's New Thinking in Farmers Weekly, it's following on from the Climate Change Commission's recommendations that farmers probably face the prospect of reducing their stocking rates to meet carbon reduction obligations. But the head of the nation's largest seed bank is urging, well, hang on a minute, we may be sitting on the answers, mining into our seed banks to find that gold, which could be lowering methane emissions. Looking into this article, I have to highlight this extremely interesting fact. There are more than 300,000 species of flowering plants on the planet. Only 120 are cultivated, and 9 account for 75% of global plant-derived energy. Only 3, wheat, rice and maize alone, account for more than 50%. So it's understandable that a group of 37 science institutes around the world are calling for greater crop biodiversity to contend with climate change, pestilence and disease outbreak. Joining us now from the Margot Forde Germplasm Centre is Director Dr. Kioumars Ghamkhar to talk about this. Kioumars, it's incredible the collection that we're sitting on here in New Zealand, the largest repository in the world of forage seeds, 150,000 seed samples. Could you please let us know, where on earth did we end up with only commercialising such a small variety of our forages?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and that's a very good question that I always keep asking. But the main reason is that the human beings and us as human beings really in the history have tried to basically adapt everything to what we want. And the first thing that we found among the crops, whether it was the perfect crop or it wasn't, and we manipulated it, by very traditional and ancient breeding methods or improvement methods. What we did was that just worked on them and changed them and then adapted to the situation or conditions that we wanted. And then we generalized those, if you like, improved lines to different regions, which is not exactly what the nature of plants are, because the plants have microevolutions in micro-regions, climatic regions. But, we develop wheat, for example. Of course, there are many cultivars of wheat for different environments, but there are some other species that have very narrow genetic diversity, and they use across the board everywhere, which is not the way that we should do agriculture, in fact.
I mean, you just look at the vulnerability of when the PSA outbreak hit our kiwi fruit. And I mean, perennial ryegrass, our main crop in New Zealand, is derived from such a small genetic pool. What risks are we at of this monocultured future if we don't delve into the incredible seed bank that we have at our fingertips?
Well, the fact is that we have a very good biosecurity system, even in New Zealand specifically, and also across the border in Australia. But the fact is that we can't be perfect, and things can get out of control. If we get the pest or disease inside the country, and it targets ryegrass, and it goes out of control very fast, then we don't probably have the genetic diversity to resist that pest or disease. Or, if we explore the germplasm or genetic resources at the gene bank, there's a collection of seed that we have about 3,000, populations of wild ryegrass and its relatives. If we explore that, we can find it possibly, or at least guess where they are based on their data, not guess, more than guess really, and find that using genomic phenotyping tools, etc., then we'll be able and prepared to fight that and avoid this disaster. But if we keep waiting until the disaster hits, then it's too late. That's what we're saying. With old crops, I call ryegrass old, it's not really ancient like wheat, but with old crops, the ones that are settled, and we use them across the board in the country, we should have that diversity. Studies have shown genetic diversity doesn't really exist as such in the gene pool of cultivated ryegrass. So we should diversify. And of course, that's one side of it. The other side is other species. the number of species that we use is very limited as well.
You're an active member of DivSeek International Network, Kioumars, and it's really interesting how there's so many different examples of, heat-tolerant plants, a lot of trials in low methane emitting plants as well that we could be looking to. And there's one particular you highlighted in the Farmers Weekly article that is from the Northeast Africa, a legume.
Yep, that's called Bicerula, and Bicerula is, a legume forage legume. There's just got one species. So in terms of the risk of interspecific hybridization, naturally, it's very low. It's almost non-existent. So it's not a risk from the point of view of crossing with other species if we import it. I'm not saying that it will be perfect for New Zealand, but it can be, the germplasm can be investigated. There are about 200 wild populations from specifically Eritrea, Ethiopia, and the Mediterranean in Italy and its islands, islands around Italy. So basically, there is a diversity there. What is interesting about that forage species is that I worked on it before in Australia, in Western Australia, in fact, and when we did, we identified the fact that it reduces methane. Of course, our experiments were small scale, but we did test it in live animals, in both sheep and cattle. But we didn't go larger scale because it was a student work mainly, a student of mine, and we didn't have a lot of budget to go and look at it. But when we compared that with 14 other species, forage species, mainstream species such as clover, ryegrass, etc., it reduced methane by about 30 to 40%. So that's a lot. I'm not saying that it definitely be repeated here if we do it in larger scale, but what is causing that? We also shown that there are some metabolites that might be causing that. Can we use those metabolites, if not the forage? Can we use those metabolites to reduce the methane emissions from animals? So what I'm suggesting is that let's look at this gold mine that we have as genetic resources, as germplasm, to see what we can do for the future to adapt. I know the government and the public want change, and we have to embrace that, and we will, as usual. But we have other things to look at as well, as like reducing the stockings. That's good and fine, should be done. But also, have we provided, or are we ready to provide the material and tools to farmers to actually measure these things? Measure, how much methane is produced in their farms, say in real time, and also look at the germplasm, the material that can actually, maybe they don't need to dramatically reduce the number of animals, but they can reduce the methane footprint still using a different forage. It's not going to happen overnight, but if we do this, who knows what happens in the next 4 to 5 to 10 years? Maybe we can help them a lot.
There's been a lot of suggestions that the technology is not here, genetically edited ryegrass, methane inhibitors, etc. But are you suggesting that we are sitting on a huge gene bank of species that are ready to go, and a lot of neglected species have come under fire of lack of science funding and being able to commercialise them in an environment that's led to where we are?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say they've come under fire, but the fact is that they haven't been supported. Let's put it that way. There are species such as subterranean clover, and we have people in, say, Lincoln University and across the country that are working on subterranean clover. There are farmers who are growing it, but it's not larger scale as such. It's not really, if your white clover is not growing in the eastern, the eastern hill country of North Island, you don't have to grow it there. If it hasn't got deep roots, then maybe subterranean clover is a better option. It's not a new debate between scientists. There are a few scientists who are working on these things and a few pioneering farmers who want change and adaptation to their environments. But where is the larger scale experiments and works, or big support by the government to actually direct us to this to this direction, if you like, and basically help us go and say, test a subset of subterranean clover collection in different environments and see which one adapts to our environment better and grows better and produces yields better. We haven't done any of that. There is some work, but it's very limited, very really not in a coordinated way, really, just personal interests by some scientists.
It's absolutely outstanding, the work that the Margot Forde Germplasm Centre do, and thank you very much, Dr. Kioumars Ghamkhar, for all of the work that your team do in protecting our such large varieties of species, some 2,200 species with 2,500 wild variations alone of white clover. So therefore, we may be sitting on the gold mine, and in the article that Richard Rennie's pulled together, Kioumars suggests that he feels like a bit of a gold prospector at the moment, searching for those solutions. And of course, you can read all the further article and the details in the link of this episode below, as well as, of course, at farmersweekly.co.nz. Well, as always, an extremely interesting change maker every single week, uncovering that if we stand still, we will go backwards, and that there is so many tools in our toolbox already. Should we collaborate, connect, and listen to each other to support each other with the tools that are there? The discussion of our challenges ahead is so much more coloured. It's not black and white, and everyone has a role to play, especially in our race against climate change and our obligations, of course, under the Paris Agreement. But every single change maker that I do each week, it really highlights that we have the smarts, we have the resources in terms of skill set here in this country, but sometimes it just needs connection of further resources, money, and of course bringing the right people together to solve the solutions that we need. So the opportunities are there. If you are open-minded and optimistic towards them, as of course in any of the shows. If you'd like me to connect you with any of the guests that you've heard, please email me, sarah@sarahscountry.com. And that's all we have time for this week. We'll be back on Monday with our Farmers Weekly newsmaker, bringing you the depth behind the headlines in this week's Farmers Weekly. Of course, in the meantime, make sure you go to farmersweekly.co.nz and subscribe to my Daily Digest to get an email in your inbox, keeping you up to date with the stories as they unfold throughout the week. And of course, sarahscountry.com for all of those videos on demand. And make sure you give us a subscribe on podcast wherever you listen across the web. In the meantime, take care of yourself and your loved ones. Ka kite anō.